Morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Graham Holter from the Wine Merchant magazine, if you haven't met me already. And this is our first ever cheese masterclass. We're very excited about that. And we're doing it in partnership with the Academy of Cheese. And on your screen there, you will see in the bowler hat, here he is, Mr. Charlie Turnbull. And he's going to be leading this session effectively. It won't be me. He's our cheese expert. He knows everything about cheese. He tells me he can speak for many hours about it if we don't stop him. So my job is to stop him at some point because we've only got an hour. What we're going to do is go through all kinds of things that an absolute beginner in the retailing of cheese might want to know, as well as people like some of you who are already selling some cheese and might just want to know how to improve what you're doing and take it into a different direction or do more with it. So that's really it. We're going to talk about the basics of cheese. We're going to talk about how to get more from your cheese sales, hopefully get some ideas and inspiration for how you can do that and make it more of a valuable part of your revenue stream. So the format is as follows. So Charlie's going to take over in a sec. He's going to give us the overview. The Academy of Cheese is kind of like the WSET of the cheese world, if you want to think of it that way. And they've got lots of interesting courses and resources on their website. And I really recommend you look at their website. I was on it earlier. There's some excellent stuff on there, and I think it's growing all the time. There's articles, there's a whole library of cheese, and if you start looking at that, I guarantee you won't get any work done today because it's just so deep and interesting and colourful. So that's them. After that, we're very pleased to have two indies with us. You can see them on your screen. So there's Joe Eastwood from Licorice in Shenfield at the end of the the Elizabeth line. That's a fantastic shop. They're very good at everything they do there. But if you go in there, one of the first things you'll notice is a big cheese fridge that is big enough to get human beings inside. And I'm not exaggerating. It's brilliant. So she's going to tell us a little bit about what they've been doing with cheese. And we've also got, I'm delighted to say, Mike Boniface at the top of your screen there. He's from number 2 Pound Street in Wendover near Aylesbury. Another really, really good shop that specializes in cheese as well as wine. Another excellent place to go to get some inspiration and ideas. We are recording the webinar, so if you do need to duck out for any time, you can always catch up later. We'll be sending the link around. We'll also be putting it on our website so you can see everything that was said today. And we're also writing an article about this, which will appear in the October edition of the Wine Merchant magazine. So that's kind of it for me. The one last thing to say is if you want to ask questions as we go along, that's fine. What I suggest we do is use the chat function rather than Q&A, just to keep it in one place. So on the bottom of your screen there, you'll see that there's all those familiar icons. If you go on chat, it will open up the window. And I don't want to interrupt Charlie too much as he's in full flow, but if there's anything you think is an important question for the here and now, we can deal with it. Or just put it in there and we'll log it and we'll come to a Q&A session at the end of Joe and Mike's presentation. And then we'll be able to sort of talk to them and refer back to Charlie about things that have been said. But that's enough waffle from me. I'm now going to make Charlie the star of the show by making him the spotlight for everybody. Okay, take it away. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. It is a pleasure to talk about cheese and wine. Obviously, those are two bedfellows that are very, very big in the public imagination. And we actually have parallel industries. We've got a whole bunch of independents selling cheese, really good quality cheese, and a whole bunch of indies selling really good wine. And our customer base is very similar in terms of their people going out for gifting, premium treats. And so there is a natural crossover on a number of levels. So I'm really pleased to be invited here to chat to you. So if you have any questions, please go for it. I'm going to cover quite a lot of ground, but pause me when you fancy it. So who am I? I opened my own shop in 2003, ran it for 18 years in a place called Shaftesbury in Dorset. We were a lovely local delicatessen with a cafe or bistro attached, and it was a good business. It was a good business. I left that in 2018 as my wife found a job in Brighton, and my lease came up, and I don't want to go into my business too much, but I was struggling to build long-term value in the business. It was giving me a salary, but it wasn't accumulating growth, and I like it. So I've moved on to other things. So that's what I do. In terms of the Academy of Cheese, I and a number of other people are founding directors of it, based nearly 10 years ago now. It's taken us a long time to really get it going. We built it on the same model as the Wine and Spirits Educational Trust, which is 4 levels leading up to the Master of Cheese. So the Master of Cheese is part of a part of our journey. Whereas I know Master of Wine is different from the WSET program. Level 1, level 2 are very straightforward learning programs. You given a body of work, which is online, sort of the text, which then is followed by an exam. You can do it purely online in a written material. You can do it through, businesses like mine, where we have a video program where you have sections sorted by video where you can hear me talk about the programs, or you can do it in classroom. There are lots of good training providers providing classroom study. The purpose of it is to build knowledge in the trade and in consumers in that parallel way to the way WSET does. And it's working. We're getting a lot of trade build up, and we're really enjoying the enthusiasm of people who are following the path and then really wanting to take it further. We're not yet at master. There are no masters of cheeses yet. That we expect to happen next year. The building up of our body of knowledge has taken a while. We need it to be certified, accredited. We need to make sure that it's properly supported and referenced and all that kind of thing. And the cheese industry has been very bad at this. The French are better, but they speak French, which is really annoying, and they're not good at sharing, which is equally annoying. But what's really interesting is that what they do in terms of cheese production and cheese knowledge, in terms of creating cheeses, there's not the same enthusiasm for understanding taste and bringing taste into, vocalizing it, having a language about it, and presenting products in taste context. It's all about provenance. It's all about the cheese. It's all about PDOs and all that kind of thing. And what we in the cheese industry and the cheese independents in the UK, taste is a lot about where it's at. That's what the customer wants to find out, what they're in it for. They want to feel that their taste experience is going to be a really valid one, a really strong one. So we are cutting our own path here, and it's really enjoyable being part of that program. And if you're interested in learning through the Academy of Cheese, you can get in contact with me or through the website directly, and bring it on. Basically, you will enjoy it. You'll find it really stimulating, and a lot of what you know about wine is going to feel like it's fitting seamlessly together. So that's the sell. Who am I? Who is the Academy of Cheese? Let's get on to the curd. What is cheese? I'm pretty sure that you guys are going to know some, if not a good amount, about cheese, because there's the natural crossover in passions. But essentially, cheese is milk with the water taken out and salt added in, and then you pimp that ride. You make it funky. The very, very basic cheeses that go back 10,000 years are the goat's curds and that kind of thing. Very fresh, no lifespan, only deteriorating. And as humans have got involved in cheese making, the natural processes that preserve cheese have been developed to give really interesting flavors and tastes and textures, and really get discrimination between this area's production and that area's production. We don't have in cheese the same robustness. A bottle of wine is very robust. If you make a batch once a year of one bottling, it's going to perform roughly the same, whether it's in New York or London or Singapore, but cheese is changing every single day. So we don't have that go-to reliability on flavor that you can have with a bottle of wine. You can predict what a wine is going to taste like. The cheese is going to be different because what happened to it yesterday is going to vary. So curating, or what we call affinage of cheese, is an important part of our program. So we think of, there's fresh cheeses, there's cured cheeses, there's things like the mozzarellas and halloumis and the fettas where we're curing the cheese slightly. Then we have ripened cheeses. These end up usually being about 3-month cheeses, or a type of extension of life. And those are the ones that are blue cheeses, the mold ripened, like your bries and your camemberts and your washed rinds, which are technically bacteria ripened, but we don't tend to use that phrase in front of the customers because it's not exactly welcoming. And those ripened cheeses have extraordinary diverse flavors and are really fascinating to see different cheesemakers' interpretations. And that's probably a third. And then the 2/3 of cheese is the big cheeses, the ones that you can roll them on. Anything from sort of relatively young cheeses from an aging perspective, like our native Caerphillies, Wensleydales, Lancashires. Those are the younger end of the age spectrum. But then we get those sort of middle-aged cheeses, the cheddars, maybe the manchegos, those kind of things. And then you get those long-aged cheeses, the things like the parmesans and that, which can go on 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. There are some super weird, funky cheeses in the northern Italian where they will take them on for 10 years, and they're great histories and stories about why they're doing that. And they're great. You know, they're fascinating, but they're super rare. They're highly premium, and there's not as much demand for them as you would have for the super rare wines, which you're more familiar with. They're so difficult to get hold of, and no one's really prepared to sort of pay for it. So we don't have those upper echelon quality premiums that the wine does. Our premium section is in small production, and that is a key thing about cheese. The big producers, the cathedral cities of the world, is 50,000 tons a year, right? Big numbers. The small producers, I don't know if Montgomery's going to mean anything to you, but he's a relatively big cheddar producer. He's sitting there at about 120, about 140 tons per year. So we're completely different spectrum in terms of production level. And the artisan guys have a big investment in complexity, right? That's where really interesting flavors are being developed. And this is part of the characteristic, and I think this is true in wine as well, but it's part of the characteristic of cheese, that the more people you want to taste and enjoy your cheese, the less complex you should be making it. And that sounds counterintuitive, but complexity divides your audience. If you want a homogeneous audience with only one response, keep it on the simple taste of sweet, savory, salty, acid, and bitter, because everyone has a predictable response, and you can start making cheeses with predictable demand. But as soon as you start making things with complexity, this person wants it completely different from that person, and this person can find this cheese disgusting, and vice versa. So complexity, extraordinariness, the really interesting artisan weird shit splits your audience up. And that is the character of cheese sales. Now, things like Shropshire Blue, maybe, or Montagnolo, if it's a cheese you're familiar with, that can put a foot in both camps. Gorgonzola Dolce, very soft, lovely blue cheese from Northern Italy, also can cross the divide. So good cheese choices can deliver really broad appeal, but still sit in that niche gap. And a lot of being a cheesemonger is trying to find that purpose for a cheese. Is it going to get enough people over the counter? When we talk about cheese, there's obviously the big PDO, the geographical indication program. In wine, that is a very big thing. That's a very big thing. You know, you have your domains and all that, and they fit into a structure, often a national structure. In cheese, there are again two camps. We have a big GI program, mostly based in Europe. There's a little elsewhere, but mostly based in mainland Europe. But in the developing world, we might think of New World cheeses, and actually I'm going to put Britain in the New World here. We're dominated by brands. So things like Cornish Yard or Roll Right, or cheeses that are really successful in the artisan space, they're made by one guy or one lady, often a lot of female, really excellent female cheesemakers, and they've got their character, and they live within one production, one dairy unit, one company. And so that is a big thing, a big difference between wine and cheese, is that we have these single producers producing single cheeses with a single name, which is not, it doesn't have the same cross-spectrum characteristic as, say, it's a Merlot or it's a Sauvignon Blanc or something like that. So we have a lot of distinct cheeses, and that makes the cheese world a little bit difficult to navigate, and also has a fashion element, which I know is there in wine as well, but it's like this cheese is the cheese of the moment. And we can also see ebbs and flows in decline in quality, which is, you know, sometimes brilliant, but also sometimes sad. In the 20 years I've been doing cheeses, some cheeses have disappeared. Berkswell, which is a cheese that was really, really powerful in the late end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s, has stopped production. Lord of the Hundreds went through a very difficult patch. There's some really tricky spots for some cheesemakers, because you need that continuity. There's no reservoir of support that you would get from a number of makers making, say, cheeses under a GI like Camembert. So there's a little bit of knowledge required in there. While we're staying in the sort of the broad spectrum of cheeses, let's talk about what indies can do and what you shouldn't bother with. So I think of cheeses as feeling in as the premium section, which is cheese boards, gifting, and treats, right? Something special. You know, we had a lot of customers who have a favorite cheese, and they'd come in on a Thursday, they'd come into town, and they would routinely get themselves a sort of 250 grams, 500 grams of Montgomery's, because that was their thing. It was what they bought for themselves. cheese boards, end of the meal, or maybe increasingly we're seeing it throughout the meal in sort of charcuterie and cheese platters as part of a big premium offer that they're putting out for their friends or their family. That is mainstream for us. That's where we get our biggest sales. People are buying 4 or 5 cheeses and they're spending maybe £4 to £8 per cheese. And that is a nice sale for us. But gifting is a very important one as well. And if we're talking about gifting, it could be a gift taken as a dinner party instead of a box of chocolates or a bottle of wine. It could be gifting as part of a hamper or nice boxed up offer. And those are the ones where the indies are mostly mining their profits. In terms of what doesn't work so much for us, it's anything that is supermarket competitive. So anything that's bought for lunch, for snacking, for the family, for cooking, and a big grouping, what's loosely called salad cheeses, which is all the mozzarellas and the fettas and the halloumis, which there's not a demand for premium versions of that in the same way. That is sort of where I would steer people, is go looking for the cheese board, the treats, the giftings options in terms of what you're giving for your customers, and think about your customers as they're coming in through the door. So wine is a much more frequent purchase. There is a much more sort of day-to-day purchase of wine. And I'm not sure, as I'm not an independent wine seller, where you sit on that, but think about the customers who are coming in for gifting, cheese boards and treats as being your opportunity when it comes to cheese. Right, I feel I've talked quite quickly and I've only probably done a few minutes, but we're going to keep going if that's okay. So I hope you've got that down. That's what the cheese landscape looks like. Now, let's get a bit economics about this. It's about more turnover. That's where you've got opportunity. You've got a ready-made market of people who are interested in cheese because there's this big crossover. But how do you actually turn that into more turnover? And for the sort of the pedants amongst us, that means bigger basket spend, more frequent customers or new customers. That's the sort of nuts and bolts of it. Now, I have a sort of in my head thing, and this is not a sort of generic point. This is like something that I have learned over my experience, that you have to have an understanding of what's in the customer's head, not when they come into your shop or even on the high street, about when they're planning their day, right? And when they've got your shop in mind, or shops if you're lucky enough, daily experience or their weekly shop or whatever, and they will see you, if wine is your main thing, as a wine shop, right? Which means your cheese offer to them becomes much more of a spontaneous while I'm in here kind of experience, right? If they're going out and on the top of the list is buy cheese, they probably in their head have an existing cheese supplier. Maybe they've got a lot of cheese shop or they're buying it from their supermarket. And beginning your trade in cheese by going, I want to push that out the way, is harder than getting your customers to add something extra in the basket while they're in the shop. As that's two pathways there. Once you've got an established cheese success with your customers and they're beginning to think of your cheese, then you can start climbing the mountain of trying to make you the premium cheese supplier for that household or that, that person's cheese habit. And so when you are beginning, I would suggest you start thinking about the customers that are already coming through the shop and increasing their basket spend with you. Then you can move on to, well, actually, they associate you with gifting, a nice bottle of wine is gift for a friend. Oh yeah, and they do cheese as well. I could get some of that as well. And then you can colonize their hot top spot for a gift for another adult of their acquaintance or someone they go dinner with. So think about these expansion of your offer in terms of using your existing footfall to the best advantage. Getting new customers through a cheese offer, I think, is the hardest, well worth it, really good in the long term, but a difficult out of the gate target. If you're starting a shop maybe you're a new person, then that's fine. Everything's new for you. You might as well go for it. But if you've got a good footfall and a nice trade and you want 20%, 15% more business at your top line, then think about the motivation of the existing footfall and start increasing. Either they come more often because they go, oh, it's a good spot for gifting, or they're spending more when you're in your shop. That's where I would go in your space. But why would they come to you? For the same reason they're coming to wine, you've got a better, more interesting offer, and you know more about it. It's not a take it off an anonymous counter in a supermarket kind of vibe. If you go into the supermarket and start looking at their cheese offer, almost all their European offer won't even state the producer, right? So you'll get Camembert, won't say who made it. And on the British offer, it's going to be very, very limited. And the premium offer is going to be even more limited still. So think about the same customer experience as you coming in, going, right, well, let's talk. I suppose you've got a good beer offer. And with British cheeses, beer's often a really good match for British cheeses. Then you can start looking at the British cheddars, small producers, the excellent producers, the really interesting producers, and start building an offer around to match to your beer. If you're looking for your European offer to match your European wines, then you can do the same thing. You can start pitching into the terroir. If you've got good Burgundy, then look at Bourgogne cheeses like Délices de Bourgogne or Époisses de Bourgogne and start thinking about it in those terms, to start smoothly guiding your customers towards making those purchases to correspond with what they're already bought into, which is your excellence as a wine seller. And that is a good one. So knowledge is good. It's got to be a premium. You're just not going to steal from the supermarkets. It's just not going to happen. They're going to keep going to the supermarkets. They're going to buy the Cathedral City. You're better having an offer that is distinct and changing and evolving and being in your style than trying to pitch into the supermarket competition. So that would be my guide. It's worth discussing local. Customers will just pay more for a local product, which obviously is counterintuitive in that sense. I think it should be cheaper because it's down the road. But no, they see it as all the benefits of supporting local, the vague environmental benefits of short food miles. They want to be connected, and you're a pathway to that connection. You've got a little story about the cheeses that are local. Local really is a much softer, easier sell. And Michael was talking about the fact he's got a lot of tourists are passing through. They are going to be doubly interested in local. They want to immerse themselves in the local experience. So local is really powerful, but not all local cheeses are tasty. And some of them might be at the beginning of their journey, and they need 4 or 5 years really to get a cheese to be at the top of its game. Some cheesemakers can get going earlier than that, but if you think of it from a local perspective, the local market is going to be the most forgiving and the most likely to travel for it. So the local is a good thing. On the downside of local, as I mentioned earlier, British cheeses don't have a history of matching with wines. They have a history of matching with beers. They can and do match with wines, but there isn't that kind of plug and play, this goes with that vibe. You have to sort of be a bit more creative and a bit more discursive about finding the right things. So I would definitely, try and find a local offer. How do we sell cheese, right? Okay, I'm still moving really fast, so I hope I'm just not bamboozling you and you are picking up this. But if you think of, there are 2 major pathways for cheese: food service and retail. Let's deal with retail first. So in retail, majority of artisan cheese sellers, cheesemongers, they're going to be selling over a counter. They're going to have cheeses that they cut, wrap, serve. It's quite a specialist role, needs a fair amount of kit, takes up quite a lot of space, and it can be quite time consuming as a sale, right? So it's quite a commitment for you guys if you don't have a cheese counter. Think, oh, I'll get a cheese counter in. That is where the bigger numbers are, where people will begin to travel to you and you become a cheese destination in its own right. The alternative is a pre-packed option. Now, there are lots of reasons why pre-pack is a little bit more, what's the right phrase? Let's call it less premium. And packaging, cheese doesn't like to be packed. It likes to be big for as long as possible. A big piece of Parmesan that cut off a slice. That slice is going to taste better than something that's been wrapped in clear or vacuum pack for a month and a half, right? So it is not necessarily going to taste as brilliant. Some small cheeses, Camembert, good example, are naturally small. So they're a shoe-in, nice and easy. But the pre-pack offer is going to have lots of benefits from you if you're starting out. It's going to have longer life. It's going to require no specialist environmental health knowledge. It's going to be able for the customers to serve themselves. It's going to probably be slightly cheaper because the cheese supplier can support it in a different way, and you're going to have less wastage and that kind of thing. So there are benefits to a pre-packed offer, and a pre-pack doesn't necessarily mean you won't be able to put those into hampers. In fact, it's easier to go into hampers and boxes. The range of pre-pack, however, is going to be less, and that is going to be something to take into account. Plus, the packaging on pre-pack can be slightly uglier. You get to wrap it. If you're going to go with a cheese counter approach, you're going to have your own paper. It's going to have your monogram on it. It's going to look great. It's going to feel special. We have really strong evidence the customers like the process of unwrapping the cheese in their own home. It's like a little present. They bought a little box of goodies, and it's like a little stocking, and they enjoy it, and it's like funky. And if your shop has a good reputation, which I'm sure it does, a lot of customers are going to leave it on the sideboard for their guests to see that you bought it from poshwineshop.com, not Waitrose.com, right? And they're going to like, they're going to think, oh, that dinner party is good. They had the best cheeses. So being able to wrap it in your own stamp of approval, you know, you're certifying this cheese as good when you put it in your own paper. That's a brilliant outcome. But for you as a retailer, particularly as a starter retailer, when you're sitting there, you're just beginning to bring it into your shop and you're trying to maximize trade from your existing customer base rather than set yourself up as a cheese voice in its own right. So I like the start of the pre-pack offer as a starter, and if I was running a cheese shop, a wine shop, that's what I do. I get myself a small, affordable, 300, 400 quid pick and go cheese fridge. There's some funky options out there. You can pay a bit more and have some really kind of stylish ones, or you can get one relatively cheap. I wouldn't go for a glass fronted open door, right? You've got all sorts of issues of being able to see, and you've got all sorts of issues of the product itself doesn't sit up nicely, so the customer can't see it very well. And so that is something you can easily get hold of. Lots of sorts of fridges out there to be had. In terms of the sort of halfy, you can go down a halfy approach, which is like you buy cheese in that you like, you cut it and pre-pack it in your own wrapping paper and put that to serve. I think that's a really good opportunity. If you're strong, go for it. But also, that's something you can easily evolve into. Once you've got a little bit of cheese trade going, you can then go, well, maybe I'll go and get Osso Orati. That I like this person. This person's Osso Orati goes really good with my sort of wines from that region. That's brilliant. So I'm going to get Osso Orati. I'm going to cut into pieces. And if you go to somewhere like Whole Foods on High Street Ken, you will find that they have literally acres of space of cheese that they have cut and wrapped themselves. So it's an established route, and it allows you to pack it in your own way. So that is an option. So that is a transition up from, I've got a small counter selling cheeses, maybe 12 cheeses, 6 regulars, 6 rotating, and I match them to my wines. My customers are buying them, and that works for me. What's the next step? Well, buy my own cheeses. And then once you start buying your own whole cheeses, then you can go, well, maybe I'll have a small area here where I've got a cut and serve. Then we can develop that, and then you have 5 or 6 local cheeses. You can see you've got a pathway here, and I think you must see it in terms of a pathway, because it's not a shall we do cheese, shall we not do cheese. You need to build up the chain, because with cheese you have this big problem, is it's going to go out of date. The wine sits on your counter, sits on your shelf months. Not a good plan, but nothing bad has happened in terms of loss of money. Cheese, it's got to go out the door within 7 to 14 days, right? Some cheeses, and these are good cheeses that sell well, like Snowdonia or Godminster, that are little wax wrapped. Some cheese specialists look down on these. I do not. They sell. I love the money. They have lives for 3-4 months sometimes. So there are options out there that give you a long time, and that's something to consider. But for the most part, you need a good throughput. So keep your range small, grow your trade, grow into being a counter seller if that's the direction of travel that you want to go in. So that's retail. Oh yeah, obviously then that you have the extra options of charcuterie, biscuits, cheese boards, chutneys, very easy to buy in small quantities at wholesale prices, put on the top, and then again, you're expanding your sales, you're building up that basket spend. So so cheese is, 60% of the spend. You can get an extra 40%. So if they're spending a tenner on you, it might be £6 for the cheese and then £4 for the extras. Rolling up that bill, making them pleased with their purchase, and making it making an extra sale for you, so you can push up your average basket spend, you know, by 20%, 10%, 20%, 30%. Food service. I adore that French thing where you go into a bar and you buy your glass of wine. He goes, "Would you like a charcuterie with that?" And they come from behind the bar with a little board, and it's just got 4 slices of salami, maybe some pate, a couple of cheeses, and some baguette. And you're sitting down, and you are the happiest person on the planet as you're sitting there drinking it. You're probably not having a Gauloise, but back in the day, that's what we did. And we felt very at home in that space. It is in this country, and it's getting more popular. And I love it. And actually, you begin to see cheese and charcuterie spread itself throughout even restaurant meals, as I've mentioned earlier. It's in the starters. It can be used in the main courses. It's in the puddings. And you can even do extras. For instance, a very successful way of adding an extra course or extra spend into a restaurant offer is to put a single cheese with a single glass of wine before your dessert as a kind of, "Sir, would you like to share the table with your with one cheese and a perfectly matched wine?" And again, building up that bill spend, building up that extra sale. So there are spaces to put cheese and charcuterie for the most basic offer of just a simple bar prep behind the bar, just pre-packed sort of stuff that you cut and serve, right up to the best cheese restaurants that have cheese trolleys and a really substantial offer. So again, there's the opportunity to pitch a cheese offer proportionate to your business. As I say, my personal favorite is the most basic. It's the platter that just comes out, feels very affordable, and you have a couple of glasses of wine. So I'm sure some of you guys are already doing that because, you know, it's a popular thing. So I think there's really good space in food service. If you have a food service and a retail offer, then there's allegedly sort of the economies of scale. You can move cheeses into food service once, you know, they're getting towards date. Definitely works, but you need good management for that. You need a good person who knows both what's going on, because my experience when I was running my shop is as soon as stuff went into the kitchen out of the deli, the chefs didn't give a shit, right? It wasn't part of their plan. They've already designed the menu for the week, and it sits there, and I go back 3 days later and it's still sitting there. So you do need, it's not going to happen naturally. If you want to get those savings from reducing your wastage, got to be on it. But we're indies, it's our shop, we're very small businesses, that's what we do. We make everything personal. So it's good. We can do that. Right. Where did I get to? One-offs. That's my third way of imagining sales. Tastings, obviously, you guys probably are doing tastings, so you might want to get cheeses in only for the purpose of a tasting experience. I know Jo does that. I've seen pictures on her website of the tasting experience, and the wine is pictured around a cheese and charcuterie kind of little board vibe. Very good, very easy to do, quite controllable because you're buying against an expected revenue stream, and you can buy the right amount of cheese and charcuterie. And so from that perspective, it's a nice offer, and it allows you to explore with your customers what it is they really want. The dialogue is absolutely essential here, because when I started off, I had a bunch of cheeses and I reckon 30% of them never sold. And I'm sure you have the same experience with your wines. You know, wines possibly that are your personal favorites never move off the shelf. Bummer. But when you work with your customers and learn from them, you begin to hone your range towards what you know shifts for your area. And tastings are a really good revenue earner, but also a learning experience for you to get a sense of what customers are actually tasting. And my other one-offs is maybe you should just do it for Christmas, right? You know, you can, you know, I went to a wine and cheese shop in Ireland one time, and they had a big Stilton bottle of port plugged in upside down, front and center at their wine, and it wasn't even for sale until people had to book it in, right? They had to pre-order wine from that thing. It just is funky, right? And it gets customers' attention and gets the conversation moving, and they believe you, trust you. It's your opportunity to show who you are, your skills. So cheese is a really funky added extra you can do for Christmas that just is about your definition of the perfect cheese board, the perfect cheese and wine matching, and that kind of thing. Ooh, still going strong. I hope you're still listening to me. We haven't had people drop off. Marketing. Are you ready for this? It's coming fast now. Multi-buys are good. Multi-buys wine and cheese are good. Board of the month is good. Link to an existing wine producer. Counter tasting. These are all good opportunities. My personal favorite is designing the cheese board to the wine, right? I have done cheese and wine tastings forever. And if you have 5 cheeses, you end up choosing 5 wines. That is never, ever happening in someone's home, right? They never have 5 wines. They are going to have 1 wine and they're going to have a cheese board. And you can get your wines and then build cheese board to that wine. So you can push, the one I'm working on at the moment is a good Gewürztraminer, and I'm using Roquefort, Munster, and I'm using Brie. Brie is not such brilliant. The Roquefort and Munster are really good, but I want the cheese board to be whole. And then you can build your offer around your excellence in wines. But the first perfect cheese board is this. And again, it's building your credibility as the place, the premium place, the place people talk about. I went in there the other day, had a fantastic cheese offer to go with this bottle of wine. You've got to taste it. Everyone agrees. 3 more customers coming into the shop in the next month. So that crossover, that building around marketing, building around the tasting experience, I think is very important. Right. Economics. What margin should you get? Now, in wine, I know you're sitting there at around between 25 and 35%. You get 35% for your wine, you're really pleased. You get 25% necessary evil. That's your sort of workboard for your wines. Same in all the delis and farm shops that I'm working for. And cheese, you're going to get better. Okay, so at a convenience store level cheese offer, which is pre-pack, right? Yes, they are down there at the 25%. Supermarkets routinely manage 40, sometimes better. If you go to someone like the Fromagerie off Marylebone, they're sitting there at 60, sometimes 65, 70%. A lot of that is because they are buying in good amounts, and if they have a wholesale business attached to their business, which Fromagerie does, Paxton Whitfield do, then they're buying and they're missing out a person in the chain, and so they're importing direct, which I know is something that you guys look at in terms of importing direct for your shops. So those do up it up. But what should you assume when you're putting your cut and serve 50 to 60%? Those are the margin spreads you're looking for. Range, think of it in terms of how much you can sell. It's more important to keep the cheese moving than have a big range. So if you are finding that 6 and 6 is your opening bet, 6 regulars, 6 guests, that is a really nice offer. When I was working with Andy Swinscoe, Courtyard Dairy, he's one of the best cheesemongers in the country, cheeseman. He started off with just 17 cheeses and built a whole business around sourcing 17 cheeses from the producer, really big, got them absolutely perfect, put his stamp on them, and he's built a multi-million-pound business out of just 17 cheeses. So it's bigger now, but he had one shop, kept it simple. So you're better going smaller with a purpose than big to sit there and not do very much. So think of it in range terms. In terms of ordering, you'll be ordering weekly, and you should be looked to be selling out. Obviously, you don't want to go empty, but you're looking to sell out within 10 days. That's the sort of structure you want to be on. You'll get it wrong sometimes. It'll be 2, maybe 2.5 weeks, maybe, yeah, but you'll also be selling things up in 3 or 4 days over a weekend. So that's a sort of that standard deviation vibe, but plan to have it out by within 10 days. So if you're ordering on Monday, you want it sold by the following Wednesday. And that way your orders, you've always got cheese in the cheese counter. Who you're ordering from, I'm quite happy to share, they're easy to find, but I can shortcut that with all the sort of the 4 or 5 big, really good cheese wholesalers. They all do next day delivery, and not always the next day. So, if you order, their delivery days might be Wednesday and Friday or something like that, but they're all doing at least 2 days a week. And somebody like Anthony Rowcliffe, who does a really good pre-pack offer, they're doing next day delivery for you. So there's good flexibility inside the ordering environment. You can definitely get the cheeses you want. I have had experiences, or I know people experiences who've chosen one wholesaler and let them baby them in for the first sort of 6 to 12 months working with one supplier. So to get it under there, making sure they're making sufficient order sizes to get past minimum order levels. And they're normally not that bad. Some, sort of 70 or 80 quid is not uncommon, more for some producers. So some wholesalers, but there can work. So getting your product range and your customer demand up and running, you can work with one wholesaler. But my guess is that over time, you'll begin to work with more, and you'll particularly do that if you're working with local retailers, sorry, local producers. So you might be ordering direct in those circumstances. So from those, they'll just drop it in probably as they're driving past and doing 7 other deliveries on their Friday or whatever it is. And that's cool. And it's kind of fun to get to know them. You can hear their stories and that kind of stuff. So very easy. The ordering process is easy, affordable, relatively low minimum order level. That's not any of your impediment. You know, just you can get started with that. What else we got? Why wouldn't you do it? I thought I'd better answer that. Because cheese goes out of date and your margins might fall off a ledge. You know, that's the big risk. The second big risk is that you can make better use of that space. You know, you've got a meter by a meter that's standing in front of the customer. Are you better selling cigars or more wine or beer or spirits or all those kind of things? So those are the two the reasons why you wouldn't do it, in my opinion. I would definitely give it a go though. I think it's a relatively low risk program. We're putting in a small fridge with a pre-packed offer that you fully support with tastings and matchings and cheese boards and all that kind of thing. I think I really strongly would like you to give that a go. I think that's a really good thing. I've got what I do. I would say get trained, try it out on your customers, and link it to your success. So why are people coming in for wine? Find a way to do cheese in the same way or link it to that. That's what I would do. That's what I do. And I want you to. So please, all you wonderful people out there in your shops and with your wonderful customers and with their regular trade, sell cheese. I would like you to. And if you need any help at all, either sort of one-offs, give me a chat, or you want me to come and consult with you, all that, or you want to learn about it through the Academy of Cheese, all of that, I can open the doors for you. So love to hear what your questions are. And I have now come to the end of my 240-mile-an-hour monologue.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Charlie. That was fantastic. Really appreciate that. You've covered all the ground we wanted you to and a bit more. So that's really, really good. Thank you. So the next part of this will be to give you a break, first of all, Charlie, just to get your vocal cords back if they haven't suffered enough already. And then we're going to bring in Joe in a second, and then Mike, as I said. Now, just to remind about the Q&A formats, I had a tip off earlier that maybe the chat function isn't working for everybody. I can see it, and I can see the Q&A box. You're welcome to use either. So whatever one happens to be working, so you can, any questions you've got stored up that you want to put to Charlie, or anything that maybe Joe or Mike might be able to deal with in a short while as well, is very welcome to be contributed there. So I'm just going to bring in Joe Eastwood now from Licorice. So Joe, if you don't mind unmuting yourself, and I'm going to make you center stage.
John.
Okay, right. Yes, she is. Okay, well, thanks for joining us, Joe. It's very nice. I've been to your shop. I've seen how fantastic your cheese offer is. Can you just talk us through why you decided to go big on cheese and what exactly you did? Because you've got a lot of hardware there as well as the actual, the product.
I can. Morning. I bought a sticky off license in an affluent area in 2013. We refurbed and upgraded to meet our customer expectations, and we were ticking along nicely until lockdown happened, and then sales almost doubled overnight, as I'm sure everyone else's did. And I had to rethink the business. We listened to customers. They wanted a different offer. They wanted local. They wanted artisan. They wanted a more intimate experience. We were doing small tastings. We had a small drink-in offer. And we looked at the footprint and decided to re-lay out the shop. We gave ourselves a beer room with its own tap. The tasting capacity, because of the new layout, doubled in size. And because of the tastings, we also had more tables. We had tables outside, so our drink-in offer increased as well. And with the space that we released from beer, we created a deli. So our deli is ambient, charcuterie, cheese, and fresh. They're the 4 categories that we have. I wanted a USP. We decided to, having researched London and the South East, we decided to open a cheese room. instead of just going small with a little counter, we decided to go big from the start. So we had a cheese room. It's not huge, it's about 2 meters square. We have 50 cheeses in stock at any one time. So we went bold right from the start. We don't do any pre-packed cheeses. We do a few now, actually. I'll talk about that in a minute. And because we had a ready-made audience and customer base in a really good area, and they embraced it and loved it. It's exactly what they wanted. And we were able to have a really beautiful artisan food service offer. We have a fabulous wine offer, and the two complement each other, as Charlie mentioned in his monologue. It's been great, really successful. I do think that had we still had a standalone wine shop, it's unlikely we would still be trading. I'm lucky we have space to be able to expand and to increase the offer. But certainly it's brought increased margins, it's attracted a wider audience, it's increased basket spend, it's done all the things that Charlie was referring to. And it's been our lifesaver, really.
And what was the outlay, do you remember, Jo, if you're prepared to share that? I mean, how much did you have to spend on all the equipment to
This
get?
room alone cost about £8,000 to put up.
Wow.
The counters, we put really beautiful counters in. It was about 25,000.
Okay.
But it's brought it's paid for itself in the first year.
Wow. Okay. And so typically, how big a cheese range would you have in the shop if I walked in on a Friday? How many cheeses could I expect to find?
About 50 cheeses. I use 3 suppliers, and they all deliver next day, and they're all the best you can get. So we use the best French supplier, the best English supplier, and then we have one other for other cheeses. I'm always bringing in experimental cheeses as well. We've introduced in this last year grab and go section. So I guess that covers the pre-packed offer. And so, but instead of it being a cheaper offer, it's actually similar prices, because our best-selling cheese is Baron Bigod from Suffolk, and we do a small version of that, and that goes into our grab and go offer. So we're always looking at different ways of marketing our cheese. I do a cheese of the month, and we get supplier support for one cheese every month, to just to change it up and to give the customers something interesting and we market that on our social medias as well. So yeah, lots of cheese, 50 cheeses, and lots of charcuterie to go with it. And they're always trying them on their platters that they try and store. We're getting new customers every day saying, "Oh my God, I never knew you existed." And so yeah, we get new customers all the time. And Charlie's right, those customers try on the platters and they come back and buy at the weekend. "Oh my God, I had this fabulous cheese." And they try and describe it, and we usually know what it is because I've got staff who are all experts.
How do you make them experts? That was my next question. How do you do the training?
Well, when we first launched, we had our an afternoon come down. One of our suppliers, Perry, came down and did training for us. And staff training is ongoing. And every time we have new cheeses in, all the staff have to taste them. So we are updated on all the range. And I suppose the more you work with them, we're doing cheese tasting. So we don't just do wine and cheese tastings, we do cheese with wine tastings now. So the emphasis changes slightly. We do one of those a month, and they're almost like a little masterclass in their own right. So every time we open cheeses for those tastings, we're trying them. Every time we cut cheeses for the boards, we're tasting them. So the staff learning on the job, really. We have, I did send my original deli manager, who's left now actually, but she went off on training courses in the beginning and passed on her knowledge to our staff. It's really important. You can't just you can't just have a cheese room and expect customers to just walk in and know what they want. You have to, it's hand sell. But of course, that's what our business is. We hand sell our wine. We have a fine wine range, and it's nothing like a supermarket range, and it has to be hand sold, and it's the same. So our mindset was already in place in the right place.
Sure. And going back to Charlie's point earlier about, you've got to have a throughput of this stuff. You've got to start to, you've got to properly manage it so that you're not sitting on stock that's going out of date. Have you had any horror stories on that front? I mean, how do you manage to keep on top of it?
Yes, we have. We manage these stocks very, very carefully, but naturally, obviously, there's going to be waste. Customers' taste change. We had huge overstocks after Christmas this year because a couple of the cheeses that we bought had lost favour by the time Christmas came, and we have to place orders at the beginning of September. Mine's due now, actually. It's a bit frightening. But yeah, so yeah, there's waste. But we have board. We have the food service offer, and that helps with controlling waste. And margins will help because you've got to allow a certain percentage of your margin to cover waste. Cheeses need to be cleaned every week, and so that generates its own waste. But it's manageable. It's manageable. Even with a lot of cheeses that we have, it's manageable. We buy in small pieces. And we buy what we sell basically every week, and our suppliers enable that, which is fantastic. Which saves on waste. Yeah.
Well, you've clearly made a success of it, Jo, as I've seen with my own eyes. But that's brilliant for now. I'm going to bring in Mike now just to get his perspective on things as well. So, Mike, if you don't mind unmuting there, thanks for joining us. So again, you're a really good wine shop, but you're a really, really good cheese shop. And I think even on the website, you might even emphasize cheese more than wine these days. I mean, describe how the offer fits together for you.
I think it has moved that way. I think cheese is slightly taken over from wine a little bit at the moment. We started off 2010, hybrid wine shop, wine bar. We knew you can't just be a wine shop anymore. So we were doing an evening service. Started off very simple, cheese boards, charcuterie, easy. With 3-foot cheese counter, a little bit of prep space, very easy. With the intention that people would try the cheeses and then buy some from a small retail offering as well. But we soon realised that was a part of the business that people really were interested in. So we got really busy and we needed to increase the retail a lot more. So we've got a much bigger counter, it's an 8-foot counter. Again, the range of cheese up to sort of 40 now. We buy a lot direct from the farms. We've started doing wholesale. We do markets, events, just specialising in cheese. So cheese has become a huge part of our business. We're kind of an extreme version of what we've been talking about today. We are just as much a cheesemonger as a wine shop now. So it's really gone that far. It's a big split.
And the smaller suppliers or producers that you're buying from, are they quite easy to work with? Does it make your life more complicated or more interesting, or both?
It's pretty complicated, yeah. We've made it very complicated for ourselves right from the start. We have about 30 cheese suppliers because we wanted that direct relationship with them. So we travel up north, we go to Lancashire, we go to Cumbria. We go down to Somerset every couple of weeks, do big runs collecting from the dairies. It's a really important part of our the way we communicate to our customers as well. They know that we care about it. We have this relationship with our suppliers, and it follows through that we take care of the cheese. So it's a little bit different to most wine shops. We buy in much bigger quantities. We have aging rooms here where we can store the bigger cheeses and do a lot more cutting on site. We still have a grab and go offering, which helps us in the shop when the shop's really busy. We want people to just help themselves. We've got a queue at the counter. It takes quite a long time. You've been stuck behind a deli counter or in front of a deli counter. The waiting is pretty boring. So grab and go gives that option as well.
Okay. And how close are you to a supermarket like a Waitrose or a specialist deli anywhere nearby? Who are your competitors?
We've got a couple of towns 10 miles away have both got Waitrose. So we know people use supermarkets, as Charlie said, most of the time. But what we try and do when people know that we know what we're doing, that expertise is so important. All our staff, our 2 main deli staff are trained to Academy of Cheese Level 2. which is serious expertise. You don't get that in any other retailers around where we are, certainly. And people go away knowing that they've dealt with people that care about what they do and know about what they do. So it's the same on the wine side as well. They go away feeling that they've been not patronised, also dealt with someone who's a real expert, which is really important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to throw open to the whole floor. There's one for you, Charlie. Actually, your screen froze just as you were getting to a very crucial point about the different margin expectations. Do you mind just quickly repeating what those are for the different types of cheeses and the margins that you would be hoping to achieve for each?
Well, I would very much keen to Michael and Joe to lean in on this, but so I would expect pre-pack to be between 40 and 50%, and for cut and serve between 50 and 60%. That's where I would target, and that's assuming you're buying from a wholesaler, not sourcing direct. So I'm assuming, because I know number 2 Pound Street gets a lot direct, so you might be getting better margins than that.
Anything to say on that, Joe or Mike?
Yeah, that's a bit optimistic, but yeah, it's not far from there.
Joe, any observations on that?
I would agree with Mike. It's quite optimistic. We get less than 50% on cheese. Where we make our proper margins or better margins is on our platters, obviously. So overall, the margin is good, but it's the tastings and the food service that brings the margin up.
Sure. Okay.
If I could give a sort of specific example, if you collect from Montgomery's, you're going to be paying around £10 a kilo. I don't know what you guys are paying. He has quite a sort of rigid, but you buy that from wholesaler, you're paying sort of 17 pounds a kilo. And so we would sell it at between 20 and 22 pounds a kilo over the counter. So we're getting slightly better than 50% on that because we bought it direct. Yeah. If you were buying from a wholesaler at 15, 16 pounds a kilo, whatever that would be, we'd have to sell it for about 30 pounds a kilo to get the same level of margin. So there would be price pressure on that. I mean, is that reflected in your shops, Michael and Joe?
Yes.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah, I don't buy anything direct.
We only bought well, I wasn't as extreme as number 2 Pound Street. I would go with guys within 30 minutes, basically. That was my guide.
Sure. Okay. We've got a question about cleaning of cheeses. That Joe intrigued us with that concept. Maybe people haven't heard of that before. Cleaning cheeses. What do we have to do? Is that a kind of scrubbing brush and bleach job? How do you clean cheese?
No, it was a bit scary for us as well. But no, it simply means that you have to manage. It's a management of cheese. You have to every week or every day. Actually, you go into the cheese room, check every cheese, check the date, check the wrapping, because often if you're busy, the wrapping is poor and you have to go in and make sure it's wrapped so it's airtight. What we do is what they call scraping. You scrape the cheese, you make sure that it's free of debris and mold, and it has to be scraped clean.
Okay.
Regularly. Sometimes if you miss it, it goes too deep and the piece has to be thrown away.
Yeah, particularly your Cheshires and your Lancashires that have an open texture. The blue gets in there, it's never coming out.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Right. So question from Will Evans. We have a grab and go option in our wine shop, but we wrap the cheese in cling film. I know it's better to wrap in wax paper, but then the customer can't see the cheese. What are everyone's views on this? Who'd like to go first?
Okay, so our grab and go option is pre-packed from the suppliers, as I mentioned earlier. So we have something like a Brillat Savarin, which is pre-packed in a little wooden box, the Baron Bigod, a wax cheddar, halloumi, everything is pre-packed. Apart from that, everything is wax wrapped. We don't use cling film. We use cling film in the cheese room so that you have like a mirror, a clean facing, if you like, of the cheese. So it's wrapped tight so you'd hardly see the cling. And we always wrap with wax paper, always. And then you have a label on it with the cheese name and the size, the weight, sorry. And I think that's a much better presentation. Charlie mentioned earlier that people get it home and they want to unwrap it. It's like a Christmas present. And I do think that's part of the experience. I think cling is tacky.
Yeah, that is the common use in most delis and farm shops. They'll wrap the counter in cling film because the visibility and the frequency of use, the ease of thing, and most cheese shops will wrap it so that the bit where you're sort of overlapping the cling film is at the rear, so you don't see a nice clean face. You go to somewhere like Neal's Yard, they have something called glass wrapping, which is a very complicated way of wrapping, but I don't think it's necessary. But they lift the cling film slightly away from the cheese. It's quite curious. I would, going to the point about pre-wrapping, if you're cutting it yourself and wrapping it in cling film for the grab and go, there is better types of plastic wrap that is not cling wrap. Think more like the stuff you'd wrap a bunch of flowers in, sort of thicker plastic, cellophane kind of stuff. That makes for a really good grab and go wrap if you're wrapping yourself. Because I strongly agree with the point made that you got to see the cheese, and I strongly agree with the point that cling film is just ugly. So get a nicer form of see-through. And then if you want to label that up, get stickers with your logo on it so that you're still showing your brand right through the customer's fridge onto the customer's cheese board. So you're advertising the quality, your brand right through as well. And if you go to, again, someone like Whole Foods, you'll see that's the way they do it, a very much better quality see-through wrap.
Okay, fine, thank you. I wanted to ask all three of you, and I know we're not here to talk commercial stuff particularly, but is there what are the best wholesalers we should be checking out if we're looking at, regional or national wholesalers for cheese, for people who perhaps haven't dipped any toes in this water just yet?
I recommend number 2 Pound Street.
Of course, yes, the number one in the country, we know that.
A wholesaler who's very responsive to independent wine shops' needs.
Well, that's what. No, fair enough, Mike. Yeah, that's a fair point.
I
will echo what Joe said. Perry at Rennet and Rind he's brilliant. He's a lovely bloke as well, and he's got great facial hair, and he's and he's a really brilliant affiner for British cheeses. So a British specialist. He's based in East Anglia, but he does go nationally, I believe. But to list the sort of ones, Anthony Rowcliffe I've already mentioned. Fine Cheese Company is another really good one. There are a few around, and if you'd like, Graham, if you'd like me to send you a list that you can then distribute to the attendees, I'm very comfortable.
Well, we'll perhaps put it in the article, or we may even try and get some of them to take an ad with us. You never know.
That's a good idea.
A question from Sam. We may have covered this, but he's coming from a slightly different angle, or she is. Is there a good environmental option for wrapping cheese other than plastic? What could we say about that? We talked about the aesthetics of kind of waxy paper. What's a good environmental option?
The problem with environmental options is that cheeses are wet, and that if you leave them adjacent to a bit of paper, for lack of a phrase, the paper will separate and bits of paper will get stuck to the cheese. So you need something impermeable adjacent. So if you have greaseproof paper or some equivalent of that, it's not actually your standard greaseproof paper that you're buying on a roll from a supermarket. It has a plastic inner liner, and that makes it very, very good for wrapping cheese. But even then, when we used to have it, we would use butcher's film, which is that very fluffy plastic, and wrap that inside it, because if you leave a piece of brie even in good good paper, it will begin to degrade the paper over 4 or 5 days. So we used to ensure that there was none of that when we were selling it. So I'm not certain there is a brilliantly fully green offer that also looks after the cheese. So what I do in my own home is I put it in a Tupperware in my fridge, right? I actually decant it into a Tupperware, and that uses no paper at all. If you leave it outside, you get the air drags the moisture out of the cheese, and the cheese degrades really fast. That's the real enemy of cheese in a counter or in someone's fridge, is actually drying out, not the transference of molds or that almost is going to happen anyway. But in the short 1 to 2 hours, you'll see a degrading because of that drying out. So you've got to stop it. It's got to be in an airtight space one way or another. But I'm sure that there are very good wrapping organizations that are trying to battle this and have got better than they used to be solutions. So go looking, but you've got to make sure your cheese condition is retained, because that's what your customers want as a premium offer.
Okay. Well, on that, sorry, Mike. Yeah.
So much like you encourage your customers to bring their own bags, you can ask them to bring their own Tupperware. We have customers that do that, so they're not using the wax paper.
Good idea.
Yeah, great idea.
And it's
Okay,
better.
a couple of questions from Mark
And
Hoff
you can
here.
maybe sell Tupperwares, you know, opportunity.
Yeah.
So Mark Hoff says, what are the regulations regarding sending cheese directly to customers by courier or the post? Do they need to have some sort of ice bag or coolant? What's the experience on that? Because people do send cheese by post, I guess.
We do, yeah, we send a lot. There are problems with couriers.
It's a nightmare, let's be honest.
You do have to use a lot of ice packs. If it's going to another business, they will check the temperature when it arrives for their records to make sure that they're they're complying with the EHO. They're 8 degrees is the kind of considered the cutoff. But it's difficult, you know. A courier sends it back to the warehouse. It spends another day overnight. In the summer, it's tricky. So we do well with ice, and there's lots of different packaging now, which is another cost. But it's got to arrive somewhere chilled. It really does.
The experience of people I work with is that they plan for 48 hours cold and hope to get it there in 24. That's the sort of vibe that they run with. And there's lots of packaging that will support that, but it is not that environmentally friendly. And as Mike says, it's not always cheap, but people will pay for it because there aren't many good cheese shops around. And if you have a good customer and he wants to send a present to his aunt in Aberystwyth and he wants you to do it, then be there for them, you know.
We sell a huge amount of gift hampers. And the ambient hampers are easy, obviously, by courier. Everyone wants the hampers to have cheese in. It's a great thing. People love it. You know, they want to send cheese in these hampers, but it does make it a bit more complicated. You've got to ice the whole package then, make sure that everything stays at the right temperature. It's difficult, but it's what customers want, and that's why they come to us. So we do it.
Okay. Another question from Mark. Once cheese has been cut into portions for cheese boards or small retail portions, how long will it last? I guess it depends on the cheese to an extent, but what's the kind of rule of thumb on this?
So the law on this is quite ambiguous. So the EU standing says that the date on the outer of, say, a whole manchego should anticipate its use. And of course, a whole manchego is going to be cut in pieces. So in theory, the date on the outer is the same when you cut it down for the counter. In practice, it's interpreted in this country as being once you cut into a large round for any purpose, food service or cut it for your counter, people start running down sort of a clock of 1 to 2 weeks, depending whether it's hard or soft cheese. And you should work with your wholesaler to advise on that. In terms of cutting it for food service, when you're talking about anywhere sort of between 20 and 120 grams, that sort of thing, you're going to be lucky getting it through 2 or 3 days on that. I worked with P&O Cruises, and they used to cut and serve for their big dining areas, and they had a huge issue because they had big condensation issues. So it would almost rain on their trays because you start cooling the very water intensive air of the Mediterranean, and the cheeses would get blotchy. So it's the smaller the cheese you get, the harder it is. So don't cut it too much in advance and try to use it all up if you're cutting for food service.
Fine, great, okay. Well, we've slightly overrun, but I think it was definitely worth it because we've covered lots of topics. If there's anyone who wants to quickly sneak in a final question before I wrap up here, you're very welcome to do that. But I was just going to say, again, thank you very much to you, Charlie, and to the Academy of Cheese for supporting us with this, because it's been an education for all of us, I suspect. And the website, just to reiterate, so much on it. You should go and explore it.
Sell more cheese.
Sell more cheese, everybody. Sell more cheese.
Sell more cheese.
Okay, I think we'll let everybody go unless there's one more. Oh, someone said amazing presentation. Thank you. That was the last question. That was the last comment. We'll let everyone get on with their day. But thank you ever so much, Charlie. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mike. That's been brilliant. And thanks to everyone for joining us. The recording will be circulated. It will be on the website, and you'll read about this in the next issue.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.